Welcome back, everyone. So, by the way, don't be alarmed by this. We haven't typed this yet. I'm going to explain in just a second. But what we're going to do in this video is we're going to be invoking the AgentCore runtime with Bodo 3. And so this is what's going to enable you to invoke your agent from any environment you want, whether that's, a Node.js application, a Python application, and, it doesn't have to be from a SageMaker Jupyter notebook. You just need the AWS credentials set up. But because it's super easy, I'm just going to show it to you here in this notebook. But before we do that, I will ask you to do pip install -- upgrade Bodo 3 and Bodo Core and run it. And once it's run, then go to kernel and then restart kernel. And the reason you need that is because Bodo Core and the Bedrock AgentCore is fairly new, so it's not yet included in the default version that is inside the SageMaker environment, so you need to update it. Now, if you're watching this video, in a few weeks or months, you might not even have to do this, but for now, we do have to do this, okay? So run this. After you ran it, kernel, restart kernel, and then you should be good to go. Now, let's come back to our AgentCore. Let's find our agent. And now let's view the invocation code. As I showed you, here is the JavaScript, TypeScript, and Python way of invoking it. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to come back over here. And here it is. Now, this qualifier, this is optional. When the field is not provided, runtime will use the default endpoint. And you can use multiple endpoints with multiple different versions. But for now, we use default. And if you come back over here, you'll see the endpoints. And, we can create an endpoint. Currently, we only have one version, as I told you. But if you make changes, for example, over here in your code, and then you push again to the AgentCore runtime launch, you'll have multiple versions. And so when you have multiple versions, you can have multiple endpoints associated with different versions. But for now, we're going to use the default version. Okay? And now the session ID. So this is something that you probably, when you have your application, you want to generate on your own with some kind of UUID with length of, at least 33 plus characters. And every new session ID will create a new micro VM, which is as I told you, AgentCore uses these virtual machines, these micro virtual machines that are very, cheap to operate. So, I'm just going to type in something like this and hope that this is at least 33 characters. Now, let's run this. And let's wait for the response. Now, on the first try, it might be a bit slower. Here it is. I'll explain machine learning in simple, easy to understand terms. And then it gives us the answer. And, we can also have something like, what is the weather like today? And then we run it. And based on the weather report, it's very hot with high UV levels. Remember, this is what we wrote in the get weather tool. So this shows us that our agent is successfully using the tool that we created. Because remember, if we come up over here, our tool with the weather tool, we just return very hot and UV levels around 11. So that means that in production, our agent is using the tool, which is awesome. Now, I do want to show you something. If I ask something like, what questions have I asked you recently? Because we're keeping the same runtime session ID, it's gonna know. See, in this current conversation, you have asked me 2 questions. Explain machine learning in simple terms, and what is the weather like today? So it knows it because it's the same session ID. And each session can have a maximum life cycle or a maximum life of 8 hours. So you can keep a session open for 8 hours. However, do not confuse this with long-term and short-term memory. As we discussed, and we're gonna, see later, short-term memory can live from 3 to 365 days, and long-term memory can live forever. So it can persist forever. So don't let that confuse you with the runtime. The runtime is specific to the micro VMs or the micro virtual machines that run. So after 8 hours, it will terminate the session. And if you haven't saved anything to the long or short-term memory, then the conversation is going to be gone. So it's not going to know this. But in the coming videos, we're going to look at, long-term and short-term memory, and we'll see how we can save it. So even after the 8 hours expires, we're going to be able to use the information that was in the conversation. We'll have some other IDs like what was the user's ID, and that way we can connect the user with what the memory is supposed to be for that user. So just know that the runtime session, by default, I think it terminates in 15 minutes, but you can have it up to 8 hours. And now what's interesting is if you don't stop the session, you don't get, extra costs, but it will freeze up some of your micro VM's memory. So when you have other sessions trying to connect to this same AgentCore, you might run into memory issues, and so you might need to expand your memory or your vCPU. So that will cost you more. But for this hobby project, if you don't shut off the session, it'll auto terminate in I believe the default is 15 minutes, but I'd have to check. It really doesn't matter whether it's 15 minutes or 5 minutes. But that's why it's a good practice, and we'll see in the next video what it means to stop the session, because once you stop the session, you basically free up the compute on your micro VM so other sessions can connect to it without, any memory or CPU limits. Now, if I change this, if I get rid of these and I add something else, that's going to be a new session, right? So when I ask what questions have I asked you recently, this should not know because we changed the runtime session ID. So let's run it. As you can see, I apologize, but I do not have access to memory of previous conversations. So because we changed the runtime session ID here, it started a new conversation. So it does not have access to our previous conversation, okay? So, in a production environment, you want to save the runtime session ID, and then we'll see how we can add long-term and short-term memory. So even after the runtime expires in the maximum amount, which is 8 hours, you still have access to what the agent talked about with the user. So I hope that makes sense, and I will see you in the next video where we look at how we can stop a session and how we can manage it.